podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Two-Footed Podcast here on EPL Index. Now, before we kick things off today, I just want to share something with everybody. This episode is brought to you by our partners at Sky Bet, and we've teamed up with Sky Bet because they truly understand what it means to be a fan. Sky Bet appreciates the length that people go through to support their team in all areas, whether you're a match-going fan or otherwise, and there's just no better fit for us right now than a partnership with the good folks at Sky Bet. So with that said, let's go. What's good, boys and girls? Two-Footed Podcast. Today is Wednesday. It is the 22nd of May. It is the Europa League final day. Unfortunately, I am very late recording this. It is now 22/7, and you're not going to hear this before the Europa League final. So what I was going to do today was do a kind of retrospective nostalgia pod on the Europa League and the UEFA Cup and the kind of glory years of the UEFA Cup. But there's no point now because it won't be out ahead of the final. So I'll actually do it tomorrow in the aftermath of the final, and we can discuss whether Bayer Leverkusen or Atalanta stand up to some of the great teams that have won the Europa League over the years. What I'm going to do today instead is have a look back at this Premier League season, which I think has been largely really poor. I think when we look at the quality of football, it's lacking. Now, it's exciting. There's been lots and lots of goals scored, but the overall quality has been largely terrible. There's a lot of goals scored, a record number, 1,246. That's 3.28 goals per game. And while, we look at the top of the table, you've got Manchester City, 96 goals scored, Arsenal, 91, Liverpool got 86, Newcastle in 7th, 85, Chelsea scored 77, Villa scored 76, and Spurs scored 74. And that's all great. You've got to look at the other side of the ball as well. You've got to look at that defensive side. And we've got Sheffield United with 104 goals conceded, a Premier League record, one that I don't think will ever get broken, if I'm honest. I don't think a team will ever be that bad defensively again, unless the game continues to go in this drastic attack-only style. Luton conceded 85, Burnley 78, West Ham United 74. Like, it is shocking to see that many teams conceding over 70 goals. We look at last season, and last season the league wasn't great defensively either. We had 3 teams concede over 70. With the worst being Leeds at 78. But we had nobody over 80, and we certainly had nobody at 100. The season before, again, it was 3. Norwich, 84. They were one of the worst defensive teams ever. Leeds, 79. Watford, 77. So this is a trend that has been building. But the year before that, it was only one team. West Brom, 76. Everybody else under 70. The year before that, it was one team, Norwich, 75. Season before that, 2. Fulham at 81, Huddersfield at 76. Now, Bournemouth did concede 70. But you were also only having half the league, say, conceding more than 55. Whereas this season, you've got the top three, City 34, Arsenal 29, Liverpool 41. The only teams to concede less than 50. You've got Everton on 51 and you've got Manchester United on 58. And everyone else is conceding over 60. Like you've got West Ham finishing ninth in the league, conceding 74 goals. That's a David Moyes coach team conceding 74 goals. You've only got three teams in the league that lost less than 10 games as well, which I think points to the fact that there's less draws now than there used to be. I think teams have realized that the draw really hurts you if you're going for the title or you're going for a top four finish. Like Liverpool, as an example, lost 4 games this year. That's less than Arsenal. But they drew 10, which is double what Arsenal drew. You look back at last year, and the top 3 were only drawing 5 and 6. United's problem was that they just lost too many games. But Liverpool this year, if some of those draws become wins, then potentially the outcome is different. And this has been an issue for Liverpool in multiple seasons. Like you go back to 21-22, Liverpool lost only 2 games that year. City lost 3, but Liverpool drew 8 games. City only drew 6. You go back even further to 18-19, when again we had a title race. Liverpool finish a point behind City, only lose 1 all season, whereas City lose 4. But City only draw 2 and Liverpool draw 7. And ultimately, that's what kills them. You go back to 16-17. Tottenham finished second. Now, they are 7 points behind Chelsea, but they lose more games than Chelsea. They score more goals than Chelsea. They concede less goals than Chelsea. But Chelsea only drew 3 games and Tottenham drew 8. And if 4 of them are wins, 4 of them, Tottenham win the league that year. And like, you go back and look at some of the results in that season for Spurs, and I would imagine it probably still keeps Pochettino awake at night. They start off with a draw away to Everton. That's a poor result. Draw at home to Liverpool. That's fine. Draw away to West Brom. Draw away to Bournemouth. 2 mid-table teams, 9th and 10th. 10th and 9th. Everton finished 7th, but miles off the group above them. So that's 3 draws against mid-table teams. Draw at home to Leicester. They finished 12th that year. That's another bad result. Draw away to Arsenal is fine. Defeat away to Chelsea, fine. Defeat away to United, not ideal. United finished 6th, but you know what? Fair enough. It is Old Trafford. Draw away to City, absolutely fine. Draw away to Sunderland, who finished bottom. That's a killer. Defeat at Anfield, fair enough. Lose away to West Ham, not great considering they finished 11th. But, you know, it is what it is. But they'll look back on West Brom, Bournemouth, Leicester, and Sunderland as games they should have won. They're all games they should have won. And if they had won just those 4 games, Tottenham would have won the league title. But they gave themselves so much work to do with those draws that when they did put together great winning runs, like they won 6 in a row from mid-December to mid-January, and then from the 26th of February when they beat Stoke, all the way through to the 30th of April when they beat Arsenal, so 2 full months, 9 league games, they won every single one of them. But by then it was too late. The damage had been done. It's very, very hard to win the league if you're drawing too many games. Now, the one outlier, of course, in recent years is Leicester, who drew 12 games, only lost 3. But Arsenal in second drew 11 games and lost 7. Tottenham lost 6, drew 13. But generally speaking, you just can't afford too many draws unless you also have the least defeats, you know. But that 16-17 season, I guarantee you that keeps Pochettino awake at night. And I think if you look back on Liverpool in 18-19 and 21-22, there's draws there that 100% will do the same to Jurgen Klopp. Like the first 3 draws they have, Chelsea fine, City fine, Arsenal fine. They lose to Manchester City, but then you've got a draw home to Leicester, a draw away to West Ham, a draw away to United, not great, especially considering United are 31 points behind you at the end of the season. A draw away to Everton, who finished 43 points behind you, not great. But it is those two in the middle. It's Leicester at home and West Ham away. Leicester finished 9th, West Ham finished 10th. Win either of those games, either of them, and you're league champions. Like that's one result that needs to change that season. 21-22, same type of thing. 3-3 draw with Brentford. It's a game they should have won. 2-2 draw with Brighton. It's a game they should have won. They were 2-0 up. Now, their defeats that season, West Ham away, really poor result. Leicester away, shocking result. Because Leicester were missing half their team. But win any of those 4 games, Brentford, Brighton, West Ham, and Leicester, and Liverpool win that league title. There's that famous stat that if you change 4 results from the Jurgen Klopp era, Liverpool have 3 league titles and 3 Champions Leagues. Now, I would look at it and say, being realistic, the 17-18 Champions League final, I don't think they were ever going to win. Regardless of Karius, I don't think they were ever winning it. But 21-22, they should have won it. And they should have won that league title in 21-22. 18-19, again, I would say they should have won that league title. Now, they got 97 points, so it's hard to be critical. But that's 2 really bad draws in the middle of the season against West Ham and Leicester. And then those draws at Old Trafford and at Goodison Park are, you know, in those type of games against those teams where they were at the time, you've got to be going there and winning. 4 draws, turn one of them into a win and you win the league. And I think this season as well, they'll look at it and think just far too many draws. Now, they also had, you know, really bad luck with referees and whatever else. And they weren't good enough defensively ultimately. And that's a team throughout the league with far too many teams just being really poor defensively. You have Villa finishing 4th, conceding 61 goals. Last season, Newcastle finished 4th on 33. Season before, Tottenham on 40. Season before that, Chelsea, 36. Season before that, Chelsea, 54. But Leicester behind them in 5th, only 41. Like this season, we've seen 15 teams concede 60 or more goals. 60 or more goals. Last season, one team in the top 14 conceded 16 last year. That was Tottenham. 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 teams conceded 60 or more last year. 6. Tottenham, Bournemouth, Forest, Leicester, Leeds, Southampton. 3 of them went down. That's shocking to see it this year with 15. The season before, nobody in the top 10. Newcastle in 11th. Burnley went down, conceding 53. Again, it was 6 teams. Newcastle, Southampton, Everton, Leeds, Watford, and Norwich. Season before that, nobody in the top 11. Newcastle again. Crystal Palace, Southampton, Fulham, and Sheffield United. West Brom and Sheffield United. West Brom and Sheffield United both relegated that year. But again, it's 6. 1920. Southampton in 11th concede 60. West Ham in 16th, 62. And all the bottom 4 as well. So again, 6. Like it was such a rarity. The year before that, the bottom 7 all concede 60 or more, but Brighton are right on that 60 mark. Not over 60, but right on that 60 mark. Season before that, 1, 2, 3, 4. Only one of the relegated teams, Stoke. 3 teams that stayed up, Bournemouth, West Ham, and Watford. So it's been, it was creeping from 4 to 6. There's probably some other years there where it was 6 or 7. But this season is just a calamity. Villa, Spurs, Chelsea, Newcastle, West Ham. 14. Crystal Palace conceded 58. Crystal Palace conceded 58. Brighton, Bournemouth, Fulham, Wolves, Brentford, Forest, and the bottom 3. All over 60. City, Arsenal, Liverpool, the only ones under 50. Everton making 4 under 55. And United and Palace making 6 under 60. And remember, Palace's defence improved massively in the late weeks of the season, or they were well on track for 60. But if you look at some of these teams, like Unai Emery's known for having a strong defensive base to his teams. So's Pochettino. Eddie Howe had rebuilt Newcastle on the strength of their defence. David Moyes' teams have always been strong defensively. Marco Silva builds his teams based on a strong defence. So does Gary O'Neill. So does Thomas Frank. So does Steve Cooper and Nuno. And yet all of them are conceding over 60. Like, I can understand it from Postecoglou with the way his team plays and the way he goes about building a team. Gets everything working going forward first and then starts to make the adjustments to tighten things up at the back. I can understand it from De Zerbi, particularly when I look at the individual defenders he's got working for him. And I can understand it a little bit with Bournemouth because Iraola was in his first season there and they conceded 71 last year. So he was taking over from, a team that had been poor defensively. But all the rest of them, it's just shocking how bad this league has become defensively. 2 teams conceding less than 40. As opposed to 3 teams conceding over 75. 4 teams conceding over 70. Madness. Absolute madness. Now, look, you've got to give huge credit here to Man City and to Arsenal because they bucked that trend. 29 goals conceded, 34 goals conceded. Arsenal, then City. So they have put an emphasis on being strong defensively. But the thing you get when you watch them play that you don't get with any other team in the league is the lack of variance in their performances. Like Arsenal and City go out and do the same thing, game in and game out. And it's rare enough that you get a surprise with them. Like, let's take Liverpool as an example, a team that does have a lot of variance in their play. Didn't used to, but does now. Let's look at their results this season. All right, Chelsea away, fair enough. Draw, grand, no problem. Spurs away, defeat, fair enough. Big Six club, good team, whatever. Brighton away, draw, yeah, it happens. Luton away, draw, shocker. Absolute shocker. City away, fair enough. United at home, that's a really poor result. Arsenal home, they were robbed by a referee that made a bad decision, but fair enough. Arsenal away defeat, it happens. City home, fair enough. United away, you take the draw away. But losing at home to Crystal Palace, losing away to Everton, drawing away to a really poor West Ham. Like, they're bad results that come because Liverpool are either too lax or just don't turn up. You look at the amount of times Liverpool went behind this season. That would never happen to City. And obviously Arsenal are built on a model that's basically City's. So it's not going to happen to them either. They're able to exert far more control, which means there's less variance in the performances because, again, they're in control. So they're controlling their own destiny. You look at Arsenal, right? The Fulham draw, the West Ham defeat and the Fulham defeat. They're the ones I'd say they're flat out bad results. They lost twice to Villa. I don't think they're bad results because Villa finished fourth.
The delicious ice-cold taste of Dr. Pepper has a lasting effect on people. Lindsay from Sacramento said,
Pro tip, 40 degrees is the perfect temperature for an ice-cold Dr. Pepper.
why is 40 degrees the perfect temperature for Dr. Pepper? We brought in Sue from Duluth, Minnesota to tell us.
Oh, yeah, I know a thing or two about cold. Oh, that right there is the perfect kind of ice-cold for Dr. Pepper. I'd share that with my friend Nancy. She likes Dr. Pepper, too, My coldest...
All right, that'll be all, Sue. Having a perfect temperature for your Dr. Pepper? It's a pepper thing. Inspired by real fan posts.
But the Fulham draw, that, remember, was a late Palhinha goal. The Fulham away defeat, they were 1-0 up in that game. That's a slip. And the West Ham defeat, they just got caught really cold. Really, really cold. But there's less variance in their results. Everything else, as you look through it, is kind of what you'd expect. And in fact, I think at the back end of the season, the results are better than you would have expected. You look at City, a couple of odd ones in here, admittedly. Losing away to Wolves, not great. Lose away to Arsenal. Draw with Chelsea, fine. Draw with Liverpool, fine. Draw with Tottenham, fine. Lose to Villa, I think, fine. Draw with Palace. So there's 2 for them. Draw with Chelsea, draw with Liverpool, draw with Arsenal. I think they're all grand. There's 2 results there that stand out to me as bad results for them. And that is Wolves away and the Palace at home game. Now, little did we know Palace were due to turn into the best team of all time, but City were 2-0 up in that game. But you look at City and you look at their ability to string together long runs without losing. They lost match week 7, match week 8, and match week 15, and that was it. That was it for them. They only drew 4 games after that. They won a game, they drew a game, they ran off 6 wins in a row, drew a game, 3 wins in a row, back-to-back draws, and then ran off 9 wins in a row to cap the season and win the league. And that was after starting with 6 wins in a row, 2 defeats. Rodri missed both games, remember? And then 3 wins, 3 draws, but they're all tough draws. And the defeat to Villa. Like that for them is a really bad run. But that's Chelsea, Liverpool, Tottenham, and Villa back to back to back to back. It's a really tough run. You look at Arsenal, and again, they lose the 2 games back to back to West Ham and Fulham just before the turn of the year. And after that, they drop points in 2 games. Like, that's really impressive. 8 wins in a row, draw, back-to-back wins, defeat to Villa, 6 wins in a row. Like, no matter what way you look at it, it is impressive. And they control these games so well. Like, it's risk-averse football. But, like, you look at their wins, okay? Early in the season, they weren't great. Very, very fortunate against Forest. Very, very fortunate against Crystal Palace. Drew against Fulham. Got very lucky against United. Really poor refereeing decision on the Declan Rice goal. They beat Everton. They drew at home to Spurs and were quite lucky to do so. They hammered Bournemouth. They beat City. A little bit of fortune with the late goal, but, you know, that happens. The draw away to Chelsea, I mean, the goalkeeper just gifted that to them. They were 2-0 down and had no chance. But once they hit their groove, now they hammer Sheffield United, they lose up at Newcastle. That's an understandable result. They beat Burnley 3-0. They go 1-0 up, they get pegged back, but you never ever think they're not going to win the game. They beat Brentford 1-0. They beat Wolves. They were 2-0 up in that game. They conceded a late goal. They did have some fortune against Luton. Villa, they lost away, fair enough. But the 2-0 win over Brighton, the draw at Anfield, then those back-to-back defeats. And then you look at how they went, right? They play Crystal Palace, they beat them 5-0. They're 3-0 up within the hour. They add 2 late goals. A little bit of stat padding. But they got ahead, and then they just started counter-attacking. And they were controlling the entire game, even when Palace had the ball. Away to Forest, a 2-1 win, but they were 2-0 up and cruising, and they got sloppy at the end. They played Liverpool. They go 1 up. They give away an own goal, but they're still in complete control. Liverpool gift them the go-ahead goal, but Arsenal were in complete control. Hammer West Ham, hammer Burnley, hammer Newcastle, hammer Sheffield United. They play Brentford. They get a little bit of luck in that one because Havertz should have been sent off. He'd been booked. He dived. It should have been a second yellow. It wasn't. He gets a late winner for them. Draw away to City. Comfortable win over Luton. Comfortable win over Brighton, although the penalty was, you know, they needed the penalty to find a goal, or that they might have struggled, but they got the goal. Went to Wolves, scored on half-time, controlled the second half, scored a late second goal, destroyed Chelsea. They were 3-0 up, remember, against Spurs, and Spurs came back into it, but the Bournemouth game, they did get a dodgy penalty, the Havertz dive, but once they had the lead, it's complete control. Same thing at Old Trafford. Like, it was a really poor game. United had 1 or 2 chances, but they always felt like they were in control. Now, I thought they were a bit ragged in the final game, but I think the emotion had got the better of them. This, what I'm trying to say is that when I watch these teams play, if they get the first goal, I think they're always going to win. Like, I really do. Just watching them play, I never feel like they're in jeopardy. Now, there's been occasions this season, especially with Arsenal, where they have been ahead and ended up dropping points. Fulham, Spurs, Anfield, Fulham away. Like, those are games they've dropped points in from leading positions. But at the same time, generally speaking, when they get ahead, they're just so comfortable in what they do and so assured in what they do that it feels like they're always going to find a second goal. And it's going to be really hard for you to get your equaliser because they're comfortable to sit back, absorb pressure. They play 6 defensive players. They'll tuck both wingers back. They'll bring one of Odegaard or Havertz back a bit deeper and let the other one play a bit higher. Because they're not looking to launch it long. They'll always look to build out in a controlled manner. Like you look at City this year, look at the results where they've dropped points. They were never leading against Wolves. Obviously, Arsenal ended 1-0. Against Chelsea, they did go, I think, 3-2 up and got pegged back and then went ahead again and then conceded a late penalty. So that's a bit of an outlier for them. They dropped points at home to Liverpool when they went 1-0 up. The Tottenham game was another mad game. I think they were ahead twice in that one. Palace, they were ahead 2-0. This is an unusual City season in that regard. At Anfield, they were 1-up. So they've had it as well, but far fewer times than the rest of the league. You look at Liverpool. They go 1-up against Chelsea, drop points. They go 2-1 up against Brighton, drop points. They're bad points to drop. At Old Trafford, they needed a late goal, but they should have had 4 or 5 before they were behind. West Ham, 2-1 up, drop points. Villa, 3-1 up, drop points. And you look at other games where Liverpool drop points, like they're going behind really early. Look how many early goals Liverpool concede. It's just crazy. Semenyo in the Bournemouth game, second game of the season, 3 minutes in. Anthony Gordon in the Newcastle game, 25 minutes in. Hwang in the Wolves game, 7 minutes in. Tottenham went ahead of them, obviously won the game. Adingra scores on 20 minutes in the Brighton game. Luton go ahead in the 80th minute, but that's different because it's late on. Haaland 27 minutes in, that's not too early. Fulham were ahead in that game. They'd been behind twice. Liverpool were ahead twice and threw 2 leads away and then went behind and then finally woke up in the 87th minute. Crystal Palace away, they were behind. Arsenal at home conceding the 4th minute. Arsenal away obviously go behind on 14. They had a lead against Burnley, chucked it away, but managed to turn it over. They went 1-0 down to Luton at home, came back to win the game. Went 1-0 down to Brighton after 2 minutes, came back to win. You can't always be doing this. United in the Cup, another example where they conceded really early. Palace scored after 14 minutes. Everton just demolished them, but 27 minutes in is late enough. At Tottenham, they were absolutely demolishing Tottenham. They were 4-0 up and conceded. Like Liverpool, when they played Villa, they went ahead through an own goal, but they conceded themselves on 12 minutes. But that own goal is pure fluke. Like, that's not something Liverpool have done. That's just pure fluke that Martinez has made that mistake. My point being, Liverpool don't control games as well as City and as well as Arsenal. And it looks like, as we look at the league table, with the amount of goals being conceded, nobody else is ever in control of games either. The only 2 teams that are City and Arsenal. They're the only 2 teams without real variance in their performance level. and their approach. They play the same way almost every week. The only time Arsenal played differently this season is when they went and parked the bus at City. Normally they don't do that until they're ahead and they park the bus and look to counter. This time they just parked the bus and they didn't look to counter. They were happy with a draw. Arteta went there for a draw. But that's a choice. That's not something that happened because of the flow of the game. And in many ways, they were still in control because it ended 0-0. Right, I'm going to go to break. I'm going to come back and waffle some more. So I'll see you after this. Right, welcome back. So, as you will have heard at the start of this podcast, today's episode is brought to you by Skybet, and we have this week's fan view data courtesy of Skybet. So let me go through this. Now, obviously, the title's over, so some of the questions involved were around the title. Like, for example, who do you want to win the Premier League title? 55% said Arsenal. 45% said City. I do think there's more of the general public would probably rather see Arsenal win it, because there's a distaste towards City. And also, it's also partly because City have now won 6 titles in 7 years. Like, that's also part of it. People are bored of seeing the same team win it every year. Like, there was questions here for the Spurs fans, which are tremendous. Would you prefer Tottenham to lose against Man City if it prefers stopping Arsenal winning the title? To their credit, 72% said they prefer Spurs to win. Will you celebrate if Man City score versus Tottenham? 89% said no. Do you think Tottenham will finish in the top 4 this season? 77% said no. Do you think it's been a successful first season for Ange Postecoglou? 86% said yes. And do you think Tottenham will win a trophy next season? 59% said yes. So I think that's all very measured from Tottenham fans. I really do. The other questions here are tremendous. Is this current Manchester United team the worst in Premier League history? 67% said yes. That's tremendous stuff. United, by my count, have lost 19 games this season. 14 in the Premier League, 1 in the League Cup, and I believe 4 in the Champions League. Yeah. So 19 defeats this season in 51 games. Their goal difference across all competitions, -1 in the Premier League, -3 in the Champions League. So that's -4. Dead even in the EFL Cup. And in the FA Cup, they're +6. So across the season, across 51 games, United's goal difference is +2 from 51 games. And would they have 1 remaining against Man City in the cup final, which could well end with a 2-goal City lead. And that would mean that United finish 52 games of the season with 20 defeats and a goal difference of 0, which is staggering. 67% said yes, and I would be inclined to agree. Who has been the best Manchester United manager since Ferguson? 34% said Mourinho. Now, he delivered a League Cup and a Europa League. 31% said Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, who delivered nothing. 21% said David Moyes. He didn't even last a year. He signed a 6-year contract that United had to pay the whole thing. He was sacked by April. Louis van Gaal got 10%. He won the FA Cup. Finished 4th, I think, and then 6th and won the FA Cup. How's that not better than Ollie? I know Ollie finished second, but was the most meaningless second of all time. Jose finished second as well. I don't understand how Ollie is second. Moyes being third tells me that the people who voted on this have forgotten how bad it was under Moyes. Genuinely. It's the only thing that explains that to me. Let us return to the 13-14 season. Moyes takes over on a 6-year contract. Pre-season, they lose to the Thai All-Stars, Yokohama Marinos, and Sevilla. They beat the A-League All-Stars and Kitchi, who are from Hong Kong. They beat Wigan in the Community Shield. Congrats to them on winning that pre-season friendly. And then we go into the Premier League. They beat Swansea 4-1. Then they draw with Chelsea and lose away to Liverpool. Then they beat Crystal Palace 2-0. Then City beat them 4-1. West Brom beat them 2-1 at Old Trafford. They beat Sunderland. They draw with Southampton at home. They beat Stoke. They beat Fulham away. They beat Arsenal at home. They draw away to Cardiff. They draw away to Tottenham. They lose away to Everton. Lose home to Everton. Lose home to Newcastle. Then they win 4 in a row. They beat Villa, West Ham, Hull, and Norwich, all of whom awful. Lose at home to Spurs. So if you're keeping count, that's now 4 league defeats at home. And we're on the 1st of January. Beat Swansea, lose to Chelsea. Beat Cardiff, lose to Stoke. Stoke. Draw at home with Fulham. Draw at Arsenal. Beat Crystal Palace and West Brom. Lose at home to Liverpool. Beat West Ham. Lose at home to City. Beat Villa. Beat Newcastle. Lose away to Everton. And Moyes is sacked 2 days later. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11 defeats. 11 defeats. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them at home. Unacceptable. Second with 4 games to go. They beat Norwich. They lose home to Sunderland. There's home defeat number 7 and overall defeat number 12. They beat Hull and they draw with Southampton. I don't know how anyone could look at that and say that that is not an absolute atrocity. And while this season has certainly been an atrocity, they did win a cup last year, so that puts Ten Hag ahead of Moyes. And Louis van Gaal should absolutely be ahead of both of them and ahead of Ollie. The list should go Mourinho, Van Gaal, Ollie, Ten Hag, and Moyes. And even Ten Hag can point to the fact that he won something, and Ollie didn't. Would you want your team to lose if it meant your rivals winning the title? If it meant stopping your rivals winning the title, I should say. 71% said no. Yeah, it's about right. And finally, who do you think will win the FA Cup? 6% said Manchester United. 94% said Manchester City. Those are incredible. Sticking with Sky Bet, obviously the sponsors of the English Football League. And this weekend, on Sunday, we will have the Championship Playoff Final. We will talk about that on Friday. This past weekend, though, we did have the League One and League Two playoff finals. And if you missed them, they were a lot of fun. Bolton against Oxford. Obviously, Bolton, strong favourites going in. But Oxford with the 2-0 win. Josh Murphy, the twin brother of Jacob Murphy, who plays for Newcastle, getting 2 goals. Obviously, Jacob scored himself for Newcastle against Brentford at the weekend. So great weekend for the Murphy brothers. Josh, when they were coming through at Norwich, a lot of people thought Josh was the more talented one. His career hasn't worked out as well as Jacob's. He stayed there till 2018. He had loans at Wigan and Milton Keynes Dons. Then he went to Cardiff in 2018, spent 3.5 years there, basically, before getting loaned out to Preston. His contract expired. They paid around 11 million for him. So, it was big money. It was big money to bring him in. The year after his brother had left to go to Newcastle. His brother had a lot more loans. Josh played 85 times in the league for Norwich, 100 times overall. Jacob only played 42 times for Norwich, but he gained a lot of experience out on loan. He had loans at Swindon, Southend, Blackpool, Scunthorpe, Colchester and Coventry. And he's gone on to do very well for himself with Newcastle. Now, admittedly, at Newcastle, there was a couple of seasons on loan there too. West Brom and Sheffield Wednesday. He's made 358 appearances in his career. 358. His brother had those 2 loans from Norwich, goes to Cardiff, is in the team for 3 years, seems to fall out with the manager in the final year, gets loaned out to Preston. It doesn't go well. He's already dropped into the Championship with Cardiff because they got relegated. Because obviously the 2 boys had been with Norwich in the Premier League and then again in the Championship, but they both moved to Premier League clubs. Jacob moved to Premier League Newcastle. Josh moved to Premier League Cardiff. Cardiff get relegated. He drops down with them. He doesn't excel. And then he has to drop down again. And he's in League One at the age of 27, I think he was when he joined them. Yeah, 27, dropping into League One on a free contract, signing for 2 years, basically a prove-it contract. Last year, he struggled. Couldn't stay fit and he struggled. 24 appearances in all competitions. But this year, he's been really good. 6 goals in the league, 10 in all competitions. And those 2 playoff goals are absolutely massive for that club. Oxford have been through some pretty tough times. They've had some very shady ownership in recent years. I don't know much about the current people that own the club. I know one of them is an Indonesian politician and the other is an Indonesian banker or businessman. But what I do know is that Des Buckingham is excellent at what he does. And he was a guy that had a youth career, realized he wasn't going to make it as a pro, and immediately went into coaching at 18, working in the academy. Stayed in their academy for, I believe, 12, 13 years, and then decided he wanted to see some of the world. So he moved to New Zealand. He worked with Wellington Phoenix. He was there 2 years as an assistant, as caretaker, and then as manager. Got the job as New Zealand under-20 manager, then under-23 manager. Moved to Melbourne City to be an assistant into the Manchester City Football Group orbit. From there, got the job as head coach of Mumbai United. And then from there, credit to Oxford, went and got the guy who'd done really well with Mumbai City, winning the Indian Super League, and gave him his opportunity. And he's rewarded them with promotion. I think it's a great achievement for them. And you just look at some of the financial trials and tribulations that they've been through. They've been stuck in League One since 2016. That was after being in League Two for 6 years. Before that, they were in the conference. They haven't been in the second tier of English football since 1999. That was a 3-year spell. They haven't been in the top flight ever. Oh, they were. No, they were in the 80s. They were in the top flight for 2 years in the 80s. That's it. They spent most of their time in either what we now call the Championship or League One. But for them to now be back in the Championship is massive. It's been, like I said, since 99. 99. It's a long time. And they've been all the way down to the conference, spent 4 years in the conference as well. It wasn't like a thing where they went down and came straight back up. They've worked their way back and grinded their way back, and I'm delighted for them. Absolutely delighted for them to get their opportunity in the Championship next year. And it's a really tough league. It's going to be really, really hard to survive. But they can look at Plymouth and they can look at Sheffield Wednesday, who came up last season. Now, it was down to the final day, obviously, but they both survived. Don't think they should look at Ipswich, because Ipswich are a very unique case who get back-to-back promotions. But, you can always dream. In the League Two playoff final, Crawley Town beat Crewe Alexandra by 2-0. Danilo Orsi with the first goal of the game. Absolutely outrageous assist. Outrageous assist on that one. And then Liam Kelly wraps it up on 85. Big, big win for Crawley. Crewe, I just thought, came out flat, similar to Bolton. Like, Bolton were really, really flat in their performance, but I thought Crewe were as well. They had a couple of good moments. They had a penalty awarded, Crewe did, after the Crawley keeper was adjudged to have brought down, Christ, was it Long? Yeah, it was Long, Chris Long, the left winger, formerly of Burnley and Everton. One of the worst dives you'll ever see. One of the worst dives you'll ever see. Keeper actually makes contact with the ball, makes no contact with the player, and the player flings himself to the ground, and thank God there was VAR, because that took place at 1-0. So that would have been 1-1 had that penalty been given, and would have changed the game wrongly. But it's massive for Crawley. They're another club that have been through some tough times in recent years. They're a club I used to regularly go and watch, because I lived in Brighton, and when they were in the conference at the time, might have even been the National League South, they'd often play on a Friday night, so simple train up. And it was always a fairly tasty atmosphere. Local fans could be a bit spicy. Now, to be fair to them, they could really be a bit gnarly. I remember going. I've mentioned my friend Paul Sterrett a few times as a Swindon fan, and Swindon drew Crawley in the FA Cup, either first or second round, and we decided to go, and Paul got tickets through Swindon, so we had tickets in the away portion, and we ended up right next to the Crawley fans. It was like us, about 6 feet that they left empty, and the police were lining it. And then the and then the Crawley fans. And unbeknownst to me, who like a dumbass is watching the game, some of the Swindon boys around me are intent on winding up the Crawley fans and have nothing else in their mind other than winding these people up. And the first I realized was there was a guy climbed the first barrier and got through the first line of police, came across, was mounting the second railing to get across, and the police grabbed him and pulled him out. And then I realized that the atmosphere had gotten quite nasty between the two, but it didn't affect me. I was just there watching the game, wasn't there to support either club really, just wanted to watch a decent game. We're leaving, walking up the road, and one of the lads walking beside us is wearing a Swindon jersey. And next thing, this guy comes running as fast as he could towards us. And he gets to within about 15 feet. And I realize, this is going to be some sort of scrap. He's going to go for one of us. And this cop comes out of nowhere and rugby tackles him. And I played rugby for years. I've never seen anybody tackle somebody as perfectly, right into a bush, and floored him. So he just kept walking as if everything was fine. But a couple of weeks later, I was in Crawley, and some guy just recognised me and was like, "You were in the Swindon end." And I was like, "Oh yeah, my mate's a Swindon fan." He just looked at me and goes, "Well, you want to get better mates," and walked off and left me. But it's just funny. Crawley fans, yeah, good bunch of people, but they don't take being been mocked at their own stadium all that well. Delighted for them. Absolutely delighted for them to be promoted into League One. And funnily enough, as I mentioned, Swindon are left behind as a bottom half team in League Two. Crawley got in 7th and overcame all the odds, beating MK Dons and then Crewe. So credit to them. Huge achievement. And good luck to them next season. We'll leave it there. We'll come back with the news and the gossip. Right, welcome back. So obviously one big bit of news that took place yesterday is that Maurizio Pochettino is out as Chelsea manager. The names in the frame to replace him: Sebastian Hoeneß has been mentioned. He's already made it clear he's not leaving Stuttgart. Vincent Kompany, I'm absolutely shocked that he's been linked to both Chelsea and Bayern Munich. He got relegated. Ruben Amorim, he's turned Chelsea down twice. I'd be surprised if he went there. Roberto De Zerbi obviously has left Brighton. I have a feeling Brighton might have agreed to let him leave on the basis that he doesn't go to another English club. Kieran McKenna, who's also being linked with Brighton and with Manchester United should they part ways with Ten Hag. I'd be disappointed with him if he left Ipswich. I think you've got to see it out. You know, you've gotten them to the Premier League. Have a go at it. See how it goes. No one's going to think any worse of you if you go down. Like, it will not harm his reputation unless they have like a Sheffield United season or a Derby County season. It's not going to harm his reputation in the slightest. If he kept them up, his reputation goes even more stratospheric. I'd be disappointed if he did. I think Thomas Tuchel's name will float around. I think who they'd ideally like is Nagelsmann, who they wanted last summer before pivoting to Poch. I think they've made a mistake in getting rid of Pochettino. I understand that with the long-term view that maybe he didn't line up with them, but you've got to build foundations before you can have a long-term view. Thomas Frank's name has been mentioned. I could see him having interest in it. I just don't see how, is that an upgrade from Pochettino? I wouldn't say so. I think Thomas Frank's a good manager, but he's not an upgrade. He's certainly not more attack-minded, if that was the issue. His football's quite similar to Pochettino in a lot of ways. There's rumours already that a number of the players are unhappy. There's a lot of talk about who could be sold. The names that sort of at the moment are doing the rounds, obviously Conor Gallagher, should an offer come in. He's got a year left in his contract. Trevoh Chalobah, I think he's an interesting one. Ian Maatsen, he's had a really good loan at Dortmund. He's had good loans at Burnley and at Coventry. He counts as homegrown. I mean, for me, I think they should be keeping him to be their left back, but you know. And Armando Broja, whose value's taken quite the hit the last 2 years, ACL tear, and then a pretty poor loan. So yeah, I mean, what will those four bring in? I don't know. I think Chalobah could bring 25, Maatsen 25 to 30. Gallagher, I don't think they're going to get the 50 that they think they're going to get with 1 year left in his deal. I'd be shocked if anyone did that. But you never know. Someone paid 60 million for Mason Mount last year. Broja, I think you're probably looking at a loan with an obligation to buy for like 15 million or something. There is clubs that could use him, but I think he's probably best suited to a championship club right now. Speaking of players that have been at Fulham this past year, Tosin Adarabioyo is to leave. And it looks like it will come down to Manchester United and Newcastle. My guess is he goes to Newcastle. And I think he's a good signing for them. I think him and Botman's a really promising pairing moving forward. Ipswich manager Kieran McKenna is likely to reject any new contract offer. He's currently contracted to them until 2027. So I can understand him not wanting to commit any more, any longer to them. But I mean, if he's going to leave, Brighton is the better club to leave for without question. United are a dumpster fire in need of an incredible overhaul, and you won't get time. Chelsea are pretty close to a dumpster fire and also in need of a lot of building. So I think both of those moves are bad for him, but Brighton would be a really good move. I'd just rather see him stay at Ipswich for a year. There'll be Premier League jobs available next summer. West Ham would be a good job for him, though, but Lopetegui's probably going there. Inter Milan have been taken over by US investment fund Oaktree after their owners, Sunning, missed a €395 million debt repayment deadline. And it looks like Oaktree will buy the club, or will take over the club in lieu of that debt and look to sell. Now, my assumption is that Sunning will still retain a large percentage of the club, but that the sale goes out of their hands and they will just get whatever's left after Oaktree retrieve their $395 million. I mean, their chairman, Stephen Zhang, he's 32 years of age. His dad owns the company that owns the club. And he said that attempts to find an agreement have been unsuccessful. Just very strange that they couldn't find that money, given they had money burning a hole in their pocket when they took the club over. The Puskas Arena in Budapest will host the 2026 Champions League final. That has been agreed by UEFA after the executive committee met in Dublin. They're in Dublin, obviously, this week for the Europa League final. That stadium has hosted games at Euro 2020. It hosted last season's Europa League final between Sevilla and Roma. The decision on the host city for 2027 has been postponed as UEFA seeks information from the Italian Football Federation on refurbishment plans for the San Siro. The 2026 Women's Champions League final will take place in Oslo. Besiktas Park will host the 2026 Europa League and 2027 Europa Conference League finals. So that's good news for them and for the economy of Istanbul and I suppose Turkey in general. That stadium is pretty impressive looking, to be fair. One of three, I think it's three great stadiums in Istanbul, because the Ataturk's not in Istanbul, it's way outside. But you've got their stadium, you've got Galatasaray's, which is pretty spectacular, to be fair. And Fenerbahce's is awesome as well. So, yeah, you've got, the three of them. I don't think there's any others in Istanbul that are worth too much mention. There's a couple of other really good ones in that league, for sure. Like Adana Demirspor's new stadium is looking like it'll be great. Trabzonspor Stadium is fantastic. But I think Rams Park, which is Galatasaray's, the Sukru, which is Fenerbahce's, and Besiktas Stadium, Besiktas Park, are the ones that are stand out in the capital. The 2026 Europa Conference League final will take place at Leipzig's RB Arena, and the 2027 Europa League final will be at Stadion Frankfurt. So next year, 2026, it is Besiktas for the Europa League and Leipzig for the Conference League. And in the following year, it's Frankfurt for the Europa League and Besiktas for the Conference League. That's pretty cool. If you haven't seen, the Women's Champions League final is also this weekend, and again, something we'll touch on Friday. It's taking place in Bilbao. Where's next season's 2025 Champions League final? Next season's Champions League final will be at the Alliance Arena in Munich. The Europa League final for next year is in Bilbao. And the Europa Conference League final will be in Stadion Wrocław. Wrocław? Is that right? in Poland, obviously. It's actually a fantastic looking stadium. 45,000 capacity. So, for perhaps Chelsea could be in it. Newcastle could be in it. If Newcastle get to that final, they'll bring 40,000 people to that. Toon get to a big final, they're bringing a crowd. Anyway, what else do we have here? That's pretty much it. Newcastle beat Spurs on penalties in Madness Melbourne friendly. Why are we having friendlies? The season just ended. The game ended 1-1. Maddison scored for Spurs, and then Isak scored for the Toon, and Newcastle won 5-4 on penalties. But what's crazy to me is that loads of the top players went for this nonsense when you've got Euros coming up, you've got Copa America coming up this summer. Talk about running players into the ground. It's just pretty shameful, to be honest. Right. We've got 2 days worth of gossip, so let's go. Aston Villa are closing in on signing Ross Barkley. I quite like that one. I think he had a great season. He was good there the first time until he got injured. Arsenal want to sign a striker with Alexander Isak and Brian Brobby top of the list. That's two very different things. Isak is going to cost 120 million, so there is zero chance he's going there. Brian Brobby's an interesting one, 22 years of age. Had a pretty good season, 22 goals in 42 games, but that is really the only season where he's kind of stood out. Last year he got 14 and 44. He's always been very highly regarded, but I'd be curious to see how much Ajax would want from him. I wouldn't pay more than 30 million. And I don't even think I'd do it because I don't think I'd buy anybody from the Eredivisie. Bayern Munich have held initial talks with Vincent Kompany, whose Burnley side were relegated from the Premier League this season. Kompany would be interested in taking over. Of course he would. From Burnley to Bayern Munich after a relegation. Chelsea and Manchester United have made contact with Ipswich Town boss Kieran McKenna. Wolves will demand a club record fee of 60 million for Pedro Neto. I think that's designed to scare teams off. I don't think they want to sell him. Aston Villa are willing to listen to offers for Diego Carlos. They paid quite a lot for him. I'm not sure that's going to help much with profit and sustainability. Villa boss Unai Emery wants to sign Ronald Araujo. That would be an unbelievable signing. Stoke are interested in signing Connor Cody. I think a bunch of championship clubs could do with Connor Cody. Leicester are set to compete with Lyon and Brest for Burkina Faso forward Mohamed Kanate, who's out of contract with Russian club Akhmat Grozny this summer. Ange Postecoglou has asked the club for at least 3 new signings this summer, and Liam Rossignol has emerged as a contender to succeed Roberto De Zerbi. I feel like that's unlikely. PSV winger Johan Bakayoko is among the players Liverpool are interested in. I doubt it. I think the old regime were. The new regime are smart, so I don't think they will be. The Manchester United are interested in Jarrett Branthwaite. We all know that. And the Toffees could move for Davinson Sanchez as a replacement. I would be shocked, absolutely floored if they moved for Davinson Sanchez. Don't know who Mark Bruss is, but I'm going to call him a spoofer. Tottenham are ready to cash in on Emerson Royale. Juventus, AC Milan and Bayern Munich all keen. Have they not watched the fella play? Newcastle could move for Lloyd Kelly. He's available on a free. He's played for Howe before. It makes sense. Newcastle want to bring in Georgi Mamardashvili from Valencia. I think that would be a great signing. I genuinely think that would be a great signing. 23, doesn't need to play straight away. Be a great cup goalkeeper, European goalkeeper as you develop him behind Pope. Take over after next season. You've Pope then as a backup for you, and you move Pope on and you bring someone else in. And I think he could be your long-term goalkeeper. I think he's a huge talent. Chelsea will demand a 25 million fee for Trevoh Chalobah. Corinthians president Augusto Mello will travel to England next week to speak to clubs about the potential sale of 19-year-old forward Wesley. Okay. Mauricio Pochettino is on the radar of Manchester United and Bayern Munich after leaving Chelsea. I think Bayern would make sense. Sebastian Hoeneß and Kieran McKenna are being sounded out by Chelsea. There's no chance they're getting Hoeneß. I'd be disappointed with McKenna. Girona boss Michel and Leicester boss Enzo Maresca are also likely to be among the names under consideration. So are we saying that they want a Pep Guardiola tree manager? Because that's what those two are. Even though Michel hasn't worked under him, it's still the City Football Group. So, former boss Thomas Tuchel held loose talks with Chelsea about returning to the club. I think that's possible. I really do. Manchester United are exploring the possibility of signing Mark Guehi if they fail to strike a deal for Jared Bradley. What United actually need to do is sign both of them, but I actually don't think they're going to sign either of them. Everton have placed a minimum price tag. What's the maximum price tag then? On Jared Branthwaite, 80 million. Man City are open to offers for Ederson, who is attracting interest from Saudi Arabia. So are City preparing to go and buy a new goalkeeper? Who would that be? Like, who are they going to go and get? Mamardashvili would have to be on that list. He's one of the best keepers around of his age. Anatoly Trubin, maybe? Don't think he's quite ready for that. But I'm sure they'll have a plan. They always do. Manchester United are in a position to spend heavily in the summer transfer window. Well, according to actual experts, no, they're not. So Football Insider, I think, are spoofing. Tottenham are contemplating a swoop for Dominic Solanke. I could see that one working. Arsenal, Manchester United, and Liverpool have all made contact with Benfica about Antonio Silva. He's not going to go to Arsenal. He won't go anywhere and be a backup. It's this Mark Bruss fella again. So again, we're going to call him a spoofer. Tottenham have asked about the availability of Trevoh Chalobah. United and Bayern sent scouts to watch Malian midfielder Malik Jr. Yalkoi play for IFK Gothenburg in a 1-0 win over Mjällby. Aston Villa have lodged a bid of 13 million for Marcus Acuna. No, they haven't. Nonsense. Villa are also interested in Raul Bellanova after impressing during his season with Torino, but Manchester United and West Ham are also keen. He's a good player. West Ham are considering a move for Serhou Guirassy. Would be a great move for them. Not sure he'll leave a Champions League team, though. But the money, he's 28 and it'll be his last chance at a big move. So, yeah, maybe. Aston Villa and Tottenham are looking at moves for Andrea Cambiaso, who is valued at 34 million by Juventus. He's a really good player. Really good player. It's taken him quite a while to really show his class. He had a loan at Bologna last year, which was absolutely tremendous. It's the first time... No, sorry, let me go back a year. He was at Genoa. Genoa loaned him a bunch of different times to Serie D clubs, Serie C clubs, then to Empoli in Serie B, where he struggled. Then he played for Genoa in Serie A. He was really good, but they got relegated. So he went to Bologna on loan last season, was really good, was meant to come back, but Juve came in and bought him. I'm almost certain it was Juve. Juve bought him this past summer, not the year before. He might have left in 2022. I remember being annoyed that he'd left Genoa because they're the Serie A club that I follow. I can't remember, was it last year or the year before? He's had some unfortunate times in his career. Like he tore his ACL when it looked like he was going to break into the first team the first time around. But yeah, he's just been unlucky. But he's really, really good, genuinely. He's a very good footballer. And do Tottenham need him? I'm not sure Tottenham need him. Because, like, he's a left back. They've got a Doigi. They do need cover in that position, but not sure he'd be the one. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Fulham and West Ham have held talks with Corinthians over the signing of Wesley. And there we go, folks. That's me wrapped. You're hearing this either late on Wednesday or hopefully on Thursday. The Europa League game is over where you are. It is 7 minutes from kickoff now. So I'm going to go and get myself situated. And I'm going to go and enjoy a good game of football. I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Sports Social Podcast Network.